Hello there. So today I'm going to show you how to do this mild glitch effect with slide reveal using masks in DaVinci Resolve Fusion. Let's get started. Alright, here we are in DaVinci Resolve 17. And I'm just going to show you this effect again here. So you notice it goes by pretty quick, but you'll see once I show you how to start building it, how to adjust that. So you can make it as fast or as slow as you want. So I've found, because of various little bugs that have cropped up now and then, I've found actually the easiest way to start with a new Fusion composition is to start up over here, and we're going to right click and we're going to select new Fusion composition. And then we can give this a name. Okay. And then we can take this Fusion composition, glitch effect with reveal, and we can drag it to the timeline. Now what you may want to do is figure out ahead of time about how long you want this to be, whether you're deciding in frames or seconds, and then resize this appropriately. It just makes it easier for one of the final steps. So we're just going to shrink this down to 2 seconds, which in our case will be 60 frames. Okay, now we make sure our playhead's over top of it, select it, and then click on the Fusion tab. So the first thing we're going to need is a couple of text nodes. So we'll grab these here. Now I'm actually just going to start with one. And then we're going to make it visible over here on the left viewer. And then we can add our text. And by the end of this, I'm going to show you how to actually turn this into a full-blown library effect that you can drag in from your effects library into a project, and then be able to alter the text and colors and that kind of thing. So nothing we're doing here needs to be too well thought out in advance, other than approximate number of lettering and size you're going to accommodate. Okay, and then we can select the font. Typically you want a nice heavy font that's going to be easy to read, but doesn't have to be that. So for this I like to use Arial. And then I use black. And then we can set our color. Don't know if you can hear the noise that just started up outside. Sorry about that. They've been doing construction out in the neighborhood here for the last couple of weeks. I've been trying to put off doing my filming, but they keep changing their schedule, so I never know when they're going to do this. So please just bear with it. Hopefully the AI filtering on my microphone will filter it out. Okay, and just to keep things tidy and organized, I like to keep these named as I go. So we're just going to hit F2 to rename it. And you can't put spaces in there, it'll strip them out, so you need to use underscores if you want some kind of separation. Okay. And now we can bring that into our media out. And something that I like to do to stay a little better organized, whether it's a small project or a large project, I'm just going to right click here and I'm going to go to Arrange Tools and to Grid. I can move those a little bit so they're aligned on the grid. And then I'm going to right click again and I'm going to go to Options, down to Orthogonal Pipes. And then we get lines connecting them that look like that instead of just straight. It works better for me. It's not something you need to use, but you might want to. And we'll just bring that in a little closer. And now that we've got our setting kind of the way we like it for our text, I'm just going to copy this. So Control C or Command C if you're on a Mac. And then we're going to make sure nothing is selected, and we're going to hit Control V for paste or Command V if you're on a Mac. And then we'll rename this one. And just name it whatever makes sense for you. And this is also going to become important later when we create the macro and the library effect package. Okay, I'm going to put that down here. And now we're just going to move that. Just grabbing that little arrow. And we're not seeing anything on screen because we haven't connected it to anything yet. So I'm just going to take this output, connect it to this one, and it'll automatically create a merge. Okay. And just because of my OCD, I'm having to change my organization a little bit. Okay, so now we're actually going to select our first one, and we're going to move it over a little bit, and then we're going to change our H anchor to right aligned, so that if we make changes to the text, it'll maintain that right alignment position. So if I was to go up here and add a couple things, see it goes out to the left because it's right aligned. And we're going to take this one and we're going to do a left H anchor. And then we'll put that in the position that we want. And I'll just use the same naming conventions and content I did before when I created this initially. Just because it kind of fits in the space so well. Okay, now it's up to you if you want to leave it kind of off to the edge like this, or if you want to have the whole thing centered, but you can adjust that, the whole thing being centered, when you actually use this from your effects library. So I just leave it like this because it makes it easier to align stuff. And we're just going to change the color. And you can make this whatever color suits your fancy. And I just wanted to point out something here. If we look at where it says V anchor and H anchor, where it's got this little slider, so top to bottom or left to right. Now this is going to be important later on when we create our macro. Sometimes when you change the font or the style, it will actually change the placement of the text, sometimes vertically, sometimes horizontally. And this is a control we're going to expose in the macro, which will let them adjust up and down. And you can give them more adjustment than what that slider shows just by typing it in here. You can also create larger defaults that slider bar will accommodate when you create the macro, and I'll show you how to do that. And of course the same goes for horizontal. Now because it's left aligned, it's not giving us any further to the right, but we can change that once again when we create it as a macro. Although you probably shouldn't have to, but or you can just type it in manually in this little box. Okay, and because we're going to need this a little later on, I'm going to grab a transform. I will just grab this transform and I will hold my shift key down till the line and jiggle it till the line turns blue, and then just verify that it's in there. And then we're just going to rename that as well. Yeah, I got to fix something here when we're done renaming this. I got stuff a little mixed up here. Okay, so I'm going to take this text, I'm going to just disconnect that, okay, this will become important a little later on. Basically this is more for myself to keep myself straight on what I'm doing here. Okay, and the last thing we're going to need at the moment is a mask. So I'm going to grab this shape here and I'm going to pull it down, and we're just going to rename this Fuzzee D mask. And you don't have to name the stuff that I do, just name it something that makes sense to you. And we're going to connect that. Select that again, and then we can actually move it over. And we're just going to need to make this a little bit bigger. And adjust it a little bit so that the right edge is right on the right edge of our screen here. And we want this edge pretty close to the end of this text. And then we're just going to resize this. We don't need to have it any bigger than it needs to be. So now we've got one more thing to add to our editing text here, the orange text. And that's going to be a prism blur. So we're just going to hit Control spacebar. I believe on the Mac it's Shift spacebar rather than Command spacebar, although both might work. And then we're just going to type in PRIS until prism blur comes up there, and oops, we don't want that in there. There we go. Just holding the shift key down to get rid of that. And let's bring this over here where it belongs. Okay, and we've actually got to put that in between here. I'm having trouble with my shift key for some reason. Okay, let's verify it's in there. Yep. Okay. Now you notice that we got a little bit of aberration now on our text, which is that is what we wanted. And don't worry, we're going to be adjusting that so that it's only like that for a short period of time, but that'll come a little later. So we want to make some adjustments to get it the way we like. So we can change our blur strength a little bit. Maybe our aberration distance. There, I think that looks pretty good like that. you can change the strength if you like. I think the default is actually pretty good for that. And what I did right there was this little dot that appears under the slider when you move it from its default position. You can click that and it'll return it to default, like so. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. And then where we've got our blend here, this is where we're going to turn it off and on when we animate it. So if we slide this, see, we can change how much of an effect it has. So rather than having to mess with the settings here to make adjustments as we're glitching it, we can just change the blend, and it's just a much easier way of doing it. Okay, so now I'm just going to rename this as well. Okay. All right, so now is when you have to make some decisions. And so the decision you need to make is how long of a period of time do you want these animations to go over for. So we're going to set it back to, in my case, I did it in 7 frames, which gives a nice quick transition when you're at 30 frames per second. A little slower at 24. So if you're editing stuff at 60 frames per second, this may not be such a good setting for you. You might want to up that to 15 frames or something. Okay, so now we're going to go up here, making sure that our prism blur is selected. And on our settings tab here, we're going to go to the blend. And I'm actually going to go to frame 8. So we're going to hit our keyframe. And then we're going to go back to frame 7. And we're going to hit another keyframe. And then I'm going to set our blend all the way to 1. And depending on how glitchy you want to make this look, you can either just go back to 0 and make a little tweak to the setting there. But I find with so few frames, it's just easier to actually go to every frame, make a slight adjustment to kind of make it look randomized. So we'll just go select 1 frame at a time, and we'll make changes. So on frame 4, we'll actually turn it almost completely off. And then we'll actually skip the 3rd frame. And then we'll make another adjustment. We'll make it pretty strong. Then we'll go to frame 1, make it full strength. And then we'll go to frame 0. So I actually forgot to add something here. The easiest way to turn this off, I mean, you could just size it to 0, but it's not as smooth of an effect. So I'm actually going to make sure nothing is selected here, and then I'm going to drag in a transform. That wasn't a transform. I grabbed the right thing but said the wrong thing. This is actually a mask, so a rectangle mask. I'm going to pipe that into the mask input. And making sure that's selected, we're just going to move this. Resize it a bit. We don't really want it overlapping our other mask. Just butted right up to it, and we'll resize that. Okay. So now we'll go to frame 1 with our mask still selected. Let me just rename this. Okay, so frame 1 here. We're going to go to level here. I'm just going to test and make sure I'm remembering this correctly. Okay, good. So I'm just going to keyframe that. And then I'm going to go to frame 0. And I'm going to set that level to 0. Okay, so let's test what we've got so far. I'm just going to select the editing, and we'll hit the space bar to play it. Okay, let's just go back to the beginning and turn off the looping. There we go. So if that looks like the effect you're after, then we can leave it at that, or you can go back and make some further adjustments. It's completely up to you. I think that looks pretty good. But this is a very subjective personal taste thing. Now, if you wanted to add the ability to have it do some major glitch displacement, that's actually the name of the node you want to add, is the displacement node. But we're trying to keep this tutorial pretty simple, so I'm not going to show you that. Just to make life a little simpler for ourselves, we're going to take our mask for this text here, and we're going to move it. We're not going to set any keyframes at this point. We're just going to grab it and we're going to pull it off screen so that it's hiding our text. And we're going to go back to our other text here, the editing, and we're going to select our transform. This is where we've got to decide at what point we want this to be in its current position. So we've got the little glitchy effect taking place over 7 frames, technically 6 frames, I guess, and it's going to be in its final form on the 8th, but we want it to be on the edge of the screen because we want it to look like it's revealing the other text. So we've got to decide how many frames we want that to happen over. I'm going to slow it down a little bit from my original design just so you can see it better. So let's go right to 25. That should give us about half a second, just a little over half a second at 30 frames. Okay, so we're going to go to our, just making sure that we've got our transform selected. So we're going to go over here and we're going to keyframe our position. And then we're going to go back to frame 8. And we're now going to move that. So we're just going to grab our X, bring it over to the right. Put it right near the edge there. That should be good. Okay, so if we go back to frame 0, we should see our little glitch effect be taking place on the edge of the screen now. Okay, so that's quite a bit slower than the one I showed you initially, but that'll show the effect a little better. Okay, now it looks a little robotic at the moment, you know, it's very linear, but we're going to change that later. But I just want to do the other effect here first. So we're going to go back to frame 8. And now we're going to select our Fuzzee D mask, and we're going to keyframe its position, and then we're going to move to frame 25, and we're going to move this back to where we want it, so aligning the right edge of the mask with the right edge of the screen. Okay, so now if we go back to here, play, oh, sorry, go back to the beginning, play. So now you can see how that all moves together. So I'm just going to scrub through it slowly so you can see how that box is kind of tied to the movement. And that's exactly the effect that we were looking for. Okay, so if we play that once again, you'll see, you know, it's very kind of smooth and robotic. And if that's what works for you, then you're done with that portion of it. But that doesn't really work for me. So to fix that, we're going to go to our spline editor. So you go up here and click on spline. And then we need to be making adjustments to the editing transform. So we'll turn that checkbox on. And we're going to click this little button right here to zoom it in. And then I'm just going to pull a box around these 2 points. And then you see they're both selected, and I'm just going to hit S on the keyboard for smooth. And then I'm going to change this. I'm going to click this once, and it's going to change it to still visible, but can't edit it. And then we're going to go to our mask, our Fuzzee D mask, and we're going to alter it to look exactly the same. So we'll hit smooth. Okay, so now if you wanted to make these ease in and ease out a little more pronounced, you can drag these handles, but you just have to make sure that you do it on both and make sure that they match, otherwise it won't synchronize properly. Okay, so now we can go up here to our spline editor, get rid of that, and now let's look at it again, and you'll see the change is subtle, but I think it really makes it work a lot better. See how it kind of slowly starts moving and speeds up and then slows back down when it gets to the final position. Just looks a lot more organic. Okay, so we're half done. So now if we want to repeat exactly the same speed here, then we're going to go to, so from 59, we're going to need to count backwards by 25 frames, so that would actually take us to 29. But what I want to do is I want to make it disappear a little faster than it appeared. So, and we also need to have enough time for it to glitch out at the end. If we take away our 7 frames, so that would bring us to 52. That's going to be for glitching back out. And then if we go another, say, 10 frames, so if we go to 42 for the actual sliding back out, so that's going to give us a little bit of time in the middle, and we have to have a few frames in the middle to accommodate another node that we're going to add in a couple of minutes. Yeah, I think 10 frames for that is going to be pretty good. So making sure our Fuzzee D mask is selected. Now we're going to add another keyframe here. And then we're going to go to 52. And now we're going to drag this back over right to the edge. So I'm going to be a little finicky getting it right there. Okay. But it is important that you are finicky with it, because if you don't have it lined up just right, then it's not going to be synchronized with the edit text. So now we're going to go back down to our editing transform. And we're going to add another keyframe for position. Go back to our 52. And we'll move this back to the right. It doesn't have to be in exactly the same position it was before, but it should be close. Okay, so now we're going to go to our prism blur. And we're going to proceed to glitch it out. So it's actually going to, we actually should have added a couple of frames to this, but we'll work with what we've got. Actually, no, let me show you how to do this. So if we go up to, let's see, we want to change both our editing transform and our fuzzy D mask. So I'm just going to select that, and we're going to go up here to keyframes. And see how we've got our fuzzy D mask here. So we're just going to open that up, see where we've got our path to displacement. Okay, now I'm just going to hit this button, zoom to fit here. And then we want to take this right here. We want to click on that to select it. Sometimes it gets a little weird. Select another line here. Sometimes you got to draw a little box over it. Okay, so now should be able to take that, and we're going to drag it over just 2 frames. And then we're going to do the same down here on our editing, no, not our, yeah, our center displacement here. It's our editing transform. Okay, so just going to draw a little box around that. And then we'll take that. Actually, let's move our playhead. Sometimes it can get in the way of this. Okay, so we'll take that. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. Select this one. Take this. Move that over. And actually, we're going to need to select this one and move it over a couple as well. And I still got to do the same for this. So you got to be really methodical when playing with your keyframe positions like this, or you can really mess things up. Okay, so we can turn off our keyframe adjuster. All right, so we'll go back to our fuzzy demask here. Okay, so now we've got the little bit of extra room we need to play with here. So, all right, so we'll go to our frame 50. And then we're going to select our prism blur. And we're going to add another keyframe here. And then we're going to go to 51. And we're going to move our blend to around half. And then 52. Move it back to almost 0. And then 53. We'll bring it up to full power. We'll leave it for, actually no, we'll go to 54. And we'll drop it down a little bit. 55, we'll go back full strength. And then 56, We'll turn it almost all the way off. 57. We'll back up full strength. We'll go to 58 and we'll turn it down just a little bit. Down about 2/3. And now we're going to go to our editing mask. Okay, so we've got to set a keyframe here on 58. And then 59, we turn it off. Now if we don't set that keyframe on 58, then it's going to slowly change from one to the other all the way back to the previous keyframe. So you have to make sure to set that keyframe on the second to last frame. Okay, so now we'll do a playthrough from the beginning. And that looks pretty good. We just need to fix one final thing. So we're going to go back to our spline editor. We're going to zoom to fit. And then it's this last set here that we want to change. So we're going to select those two. We're going to hit S for smoothing. And now we're going to turn this from editable to visible but not editable. And we'll turn this one to editable. And we're going to do the same thing. Hit our smoothing. Now we can turn that off. And now we'll look at it one final time. So that looks pretty good. So you can see it's a little bit slower as it's doing the reverse reveal. I personally think the faster one looks better, but I wanted to show you it a little bit slower so that you could really see it working. Okay, so we've got one last thing to add. So we're going to pull this out a little bit. And now we're going to add in something called a keyframe stretcher. And what that's going to do for us is when we actually bring it into the timeline, it'll allow us to make it as long as we want. And on the keyframe stretcher, we can set what part of it we want to get stretched and what parts are going to stay their original speed. So we'll basically put the stretcher to work on the middle part, and then everything else will stay the same. And then you can make it 5 seconds long or 10 seconds long, so that once the beginning animation is complete, then it'll stay visible as you want it for as long as you want it. Okay, so we're going to hit our control spacebar or shift spacebar with the Mac. Like I said, it could also be command spacebar. I have a Mac, I haven't used it for DaVinci for quite a while now, so I don't always remember. Okay, so we're going to type in key, and then we got our keyframe stretcher. We're going to add that. Of course, that's not in the right spot, so we're going to put that right in here. So we'll hold that shift key down until it turns blue. There we go. Now you're seeing these highlighted in red because the parameters wouldn't work right at the moment, because the default settings on this are a little bit off. So the first thing we need to do is set what frame this animation starts at and where it ends at. So it starts at 0 and it ends at 59. Okay, and now just hit tab to set that. And then we're going to select, let me see, I guess this will work here. So we're going to want to stretch it from one after the last animation key at the beginning. So it's going to go from frame 26 to frame 39. So 26 to 39. So we'll move this Actually, it's just easier to type it in, so we double click. 26. Change this one to 39. Okay. Well, might have to set our source end to 60. Yeah, I had this issue once before. There we go. Okay. So now we'll go back to the beginning and we'll play it through. Oh, what's going on here? Okay. There we go. Let's try that one more time. All right. Okay, so this part of it's done. So now we're just going to go out to the Edit tab and we're going to play with it a little bit to show you how that keyframe stretcher affects it. So now we can take this and we'll just play it as is once. Why is our glitch not looking very good? It's still there, it's just not as looking as strong. Not sure why that happens sometimes. It does render out properly, so I verified that. So now we're just going to stretch this out. Let's stretch it out to say 6 seconds. And we're just going to wait for this little red line to turn blue. That means it's all rendered. Okay. And so now it stays in place. And there it's gone. Okay, so now we've verified it works properly. So we're going to bring it back down to the proper length, which is 2 seconds. Okay, so we're going to go back into Fusion. Now I'm going to show you how to turn it into an actual library effect. Okay, so what we want to do is select these in the order we want them to show up in our macro editing interface. So the first thing I'm going to do is look for the things that I want them to be able to adjust. So the only things I'm going to give them access to is the actual text itself, and let them change the color and the contents of the actual lettering and change the font and that kind of stuff. So we're going to select this one, and then we're going to select our Fuzzee text, and I'm holding my control key down, as you can see, and then we'll go select our 2 masks, and then we'll select the rest one by one. Now you don't have to do it this way. You could just draw a box around and select them all. It's just, this makes it easier to find everything when you go to create the macro. Just efficiencies in workflow, basically, is what it comes down to. So, and I'm going to be doing a tutorial really soon. That's probably going to be my next tutorial on things to speed up your workflow and efficiency across the board in DaVinci Resolve. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. Okay, so now we're going to right click here. Oh, one thing before we do this, actually, if we go to our merge, select that, and we go to settings. Now let's say you're going to be looking to give these away or sell them, effects that you're making, or maybe you're doing custom ones on Fiverr or something. So if you want to have your contact information be visible within the interface when they're using it as a library effect, you pick your whatever your last one in here is, other than something like a keyframe stretcher. So just like one of the normal merges or a graphic or whatever, just whatever is going to be like at kind of the very bottom of your interface. And then you go over here to the comments and you put in your contact information. So like in my case, it would be Fuzzee D Productions, and then I could put my website and my phone number and where I'm located. I mean, you don't have to put your actual address in there, but you can put, you know, in my case, I would put Alberta, Canada, and you know, whatever other information you think is relevant. So I'm just going to leave it there, and then I'll show you how to expose that in the actual library effect. Okay, so we'll go back here, we'll grab our editing text, and the reason I'm doing this one first is because, you know, it's furthest to the left in the actual effect. So it's just a preference thing. Okay. All right. So now we're going to right click. You can right click on any of these, but we'll just right click on one, and we're going to go up to macro and create macro. We're going to give the macro a name. So we'll just call this glitch demo. Once again, it'll take out the spaces, but you can actually leave spaces, and the spaces do get embedded in the title as it appears in your library effects, or sorry, in your effects library. But the next time you open it, it'll actually have removed them from the macro name. So you can do it either way. So I'm just going to leave it as an underscore in there. So now we'll take our, you see our editing text, and this is why it's so important to name them so that you know what's what. And we'll collapse our little image thing there, and then we're going to turn on style text. So that actually turns on the box where they can edit what text is displayed. And then font, style, color. I'm going to turn these on as well, green, blue. Now, alpha, that's going to allow them to change your transparency setting to a degree. If it's a dark color, you can make it completely invisible. If it's a bright color, it'll only make it slightly translucent. And we'll expose size and tracking. We don't need to expose line spacing because it's only one line. And then we're going to go down to where it says V anchor, top, center, bottom. So it says vertical, top, center, bottom, but here it says V anchor. So we can check that. And then we can change what actually gets displayed to them as the label. So I like to change this label. So I'm going to make it read vertical adjust. And we're going to go down here to H anchor where it says left, center, right. Do the same thing. And horizontal adjust. And now we were talking about making the slider bar have larger numbers to work with instead of having to type it in manually. So we can go into here where these numbers are here beside it, and the first number is what you want it to default to, and then the second one here is the limit on one end, and the other number is the limit on the other end. So in this case, we're going to change it to -2, and then we'll change this one to 2, and we'll do the same down here. So this one will be -2. And this one will be 2. Okay. So now we're going to scroll down, and we can close up layout and transform. So this, if you want to give them more control over the rest of the functions, actually, sorry, it's not transform. I mean, you could do that, but we don't want them messing with positioning and stuff. So under shading, this is where because this is actually a text plus node. So under shading, you can allow them to change things separately, such as the actual text itself. They can change that color. And then if you enable elements 2 and 3 as well, then they can change the outline color, and they can also change settings on the shadow. And you could also allow them to change the thickness of that outline. So it's quite a bit of stuff you got to tweak. So I'm going to let you play with that. You know, that's part of the learning process. But I'm just doing enough to show you kind of the best practices. And then I'll show you how to actually take this and turn it into an installable package. Okay, so we're going to go up here and we're going to close down that, and now we're going to open up Fuzzee dtext, pack up image, and then turn these on. Basically what you're turning on here is the color bars with the sliders. And size, tracking, and then V-anchor, top, center, bottom. Now I'm not going to bother changing what those read or these. You know how to do it now, so I'm just going to leave that. Okay. Now the other thing that I wanted to show you is, I'll show you on this one and the previous one. If you want this stuff to have a little bit of separation, so that when they're looking at it in the interface, everything's not just all jumbled together, because it can get really confusing, especially when you've got, say, several text boxes you're giving them access to, or several controls. So what you do is you go down to common, and you want to turn on one of the blanks. Now for some reason, as of DaVinci Resolve 17, turning on blank 2 doesn't give you a separator line. It just ignores it for whatever reason. So you go down to blank 5, turn on blank 5, and that'll give you a separator line between this control and the next control. And now we'll do the same on the first one. I forgot to do that. So open up common, blank 5. Okay. Now we're going to go down to our merge, where we put our contact information, and we're going to go down to common in there, and we're looking for the comments field. Should be right near the bottom. Here we go, so where it says comments. So we'll just check that, and that's all we need to mess with. So we'll close that. It's going to ask you if you want to save changes, so you go yes. And this is initially this is where you want to have it saved as. So it shows you the full path here. So this is where it saves its macros. Now it used to be in older versions of DaVinci, you would just then copy this to your titles folder in Fusion, but it doesn't really work like that anymore. They want you to set it up as a package that people can just double click on to install. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do. Now I have actually showed you how to do this on another one of my tutorials, but I think this is worth showing again, because you didn't used to be able to double click on the package to have it installed. You had to drag it into a Fusion project. So they've simplified it a little more, so I wanted to show that part of it. So we're just going to save this glitch demo. So now we'll go back out to our edit tab and save. And now there's a very good reason why I'm going back out to the edit tab before I save. I discovered a little glitch in a couple of updates ago. Now I don't know if they fixed this. I just don't want to take the chance. But some settings don't get saved when you save the project when you're in the Fusion tab. Don't know why that is, but it definitely caused me some issues on a client project a while back. and it caused me big problems actually. So just don't do it. Just make sure you go out to the edit tab, do a final save on your project before closing Resolve. And so I'm going to go ahead and close it. So it's Control Q. If you're on a Mac, it's Command Q. Of course, if you're on a Mac, you probably already know that. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a file finder or file explorer window. Now I've already got this saved under my quick access, something you might want to do too. So you can see the full path is there. So it's your your default location is always going to be in your user directory, and then app data, roaming, Blackmagic Design, DaVinci Resolve, support, Fusion, and then macros. Okay, so we're going to look for this let's see here. Let me do it by date modified. So we're going to look for this glitch demo.setting. And now I created a folder structure in Documents. So under Blackmagic Design, and then I've got my default structure for Fusion packages. Okay. And then I've created one called blank structure. So this is for when I'm actually making a package that's going to go up on my website or for a client. So I'll go in here, and these little files here, these PNG files, these are little graphics you can create. You want to do one in, so 128 by 128, and then you can do one at 52 by 29. So you just name them the underscore default.png and the underscore default.wide.png, and they do have to be PNG files. And you can make whatever little graphic you want. I mean, you don't have to have these, but this will give a little icon that shows up with whatever picture you want. You can also name them to match the tool you created. So like our glitch underscore demo. So you could actually name it glitch underscore demo dot PNG, and it'll pick that up. So if you've got a bunch of different tools that you're putting together in a package and you want them each to have their own separate icon, then you can do it that way. You just have to match the name to the actual setting file. But I prefer just to use default ones. And now these are just kind of the master files, but you need to have an actual copy inside where you're going to put it. So this is going to be a title, so you're going to go into your titles folder, and you'll see I've got them duplicated here. So now I'm going to take this glitch demo, and I'm going to copy it to here. You don't want to move it, you want to copy it. Okay, now we're going to back up out to where you see these, and now we're going to right click on edit, and we're going to create a zip file. So we're going to add to archive, and we'll just OK that. All right, so now you might want to open that up just to verify that everything's in there. Okay, yeah, it's all there, so we can close that. Now if you want to keep a copy of this, you can. So you could just do a copy paste to get a new copy of it, but you don't have to. So we're just going to take this and we're going to rename it. So we hit F2, and we're going to name it whatever your tool name is. So we're going to call this glitch underscore demo. And then we're going to change the extension from zip to DRFX for DaVinci Resolve FX. And you're going to just confirm yes. And now you'll see that there's a little tiny DaVinci Resolve icon there. Now this is an official DaVinci Resolve package. So then if you just double click that, it's then going to ask you if you want to install it. And you would just select yes. Now I've already got one of these installed, so I'm not going to do that. But we are going to fire up Resolve again. And then I'll show you where to find it in your panel. So we'll open up Resolve. Now the reason I shut down Resolve instead of just minimizing it and doing this is because when you install a new tool to use in your effect library, you have to restart DaVinci anyway. They've been working on fixing that, and sometimes you don't have to, but other times you do. So I don't mess with it. I just shut it down and restart it. It's just easy that way. All right, so we're back in Resolve. I just open it back up in the same project. So now if we go over here to our effects library, and if effects library isn't open, you just go up here and click on effects library. And to have it displayed like I've got it here, it's this little icon right here. So this shrinks it or expands it. And then if you expand it, then you hit on your effects library and it shows up down here. So we'll open up the toolbox, click on titles. And then if you scroll down, you'll see that I've got it. It's called Glitch with Slide Reveal. And you see it's got my little icon there. And now that's related to those PNG files that I was showing you. So if I send this package to a customer or have it on my website and somebody downloads it and installs it, then it'll show up like this. And the beauty of this new package system is that it doesn't matter whether they're running on Windows or Mac or Linux. It's all going to install the same, because I used to have to put in separate instructions for each platform with the default paths and where to copy the stuff to, and it was kind of tedious, and not everybody feels comfortable with doing that kind of thing. So it is a much better system, I think personally. All right, so let's show you how the interface works here. So if I go to my glitch, I can drag it out. And we'll just go to the middle. And here's our interface for it on the side. Scroll up and down. So here you can change the actual text. And you can come down here, change your font and your style, color. So if we wanted to make it, say, a bright red, it's that easy. But we'll go back to the green. And now you remember when I was showing you where if you added the extra stuff on shading, you could let them actually change the elements. But just before I show you that, see here where I showed you where you could change the label. So now it reads vertical adjust, horizontal adjust. Now I forgot to actually set mine to give them the extra limit on the slider bar, but you can see it does work. It lets them do a little bit of adjustment. They can only go so far. It's just meant for fixing the alignment. There we go. Okay, so now if we go down here, we can select our other elements. So if we select element 2, and when you're setting this up, you'll notice in the macro interface This actually reads red outline, but I changed it to read outline. And so you'll see where that is, and that'll give you a clue on how you can fine tune this stuff. And they can adjust their outline thickness. Now we're on a black background, so you can't see that the outline is there. But if we change this to, say, a white outline, now you can see it's there. And then we can change the thickness, like so. And you can set it to outside only. I'm never sure exactly what that does. If you're not letting them turn off the actual main text color to make it just have an outline, then I think what that does is if you turn that box on, then it'll only see an outline of the letters. I'm pretty sure that's what it does. I think I've used that on a couple of things. And here's your color sliders. So if you want to use those instead, you can change it that way instead of having to bring up the dialog box. You can also change this text. So say you wanted it to read edited by. And because we right aligned it, now it's doing that off to the left. And once again, we can change all our colors. And then there's that comment box that we turned on, that we exposed. So, well, I hope you learned something today. If you did, please make sure you hit that like button and possibly subscribe if you haven't already. I'm glad you hung out with us today, and we hope to see you on the next one. Bye for now.